What's going on, party people? Got my pup up here with me, checking out the build, seeing what he thinks of it. He's not too interested now, but wait till it's done. So I have decided that we are going to refinish this because the Zakk Wylde guitars are always real cool looking, anything but plain. And this guitar is just a little bit plain looking. So we got to spice it up a little bit. But before we go, we got a little something in the mail. The Zakk Wylde box set of EMG pickups. Got an 81 and an 85. Comes with the volume pots. Little crazy chip here that I imagine does all kinds of crazy stuff. Like make it sound good. We'll figure it out once we read the instructions. All the wiring, and it looks like, guys, they are making it real easy on us. Except these pots are real long. I'm not sure how that's going to work out. They give us a lot of washers, but probably not enough. I'll have to space those out somehow. So, we are going to refinish this thing. Because as I was saying, it's just far too plain to be sporting these awesome pickups. So I am going to pull everything off that is bolted down, and then we're going to give this a scuff sand, and after that we're going to blow some color on it. And I promise you it's going to be really cool. Nobody got back to me about how I should paint this, so I just made an executive decision. Hope you guys like it. I'm sure you will. But I'm gonna shut up here and tear this guitar apart. You guys enjoy. Alright, we are going to pull these pickups out. They should be unhooked in here. Unfortunately, you guys missed the fun of me trying to putting new pots in here and then deciding that I hated these pickups anyways. So that was all kinds of fun, and I never want to do it again because I hate soldering down in the little cavity down there. But everything should be plug and play with the EMGs, so hopefully it won't be such a pain. Next time I'm just going to buy a pre-wired jobby to go in here. These pickups should be unhooked back here, so it should be a matter of these 4 screws. And if we're lucky, if they're not soldered together with this other pickup, this wire should just come straight out. I hope. Nope. Looks like we're still hung up on something in there. Destiny wound. I don't know whose destiny they are, but they're not going in this guitar. guys. Here on the back, there is some kind of weird pin stuck in the wood there with this wire that goes to the electronics. That's the ground. And this black wire, be very, very careful. That is the wire that goes in to the bridge, ferrule, the thing that this screws into. It's grounded to that. And if you break that off, you're going to have a real hard time getting your electronics grounded. So be very careful about that. And maybe leave this little pigtail hanging so that you can solder that to your new, or however, maybe we just magically use bubble gum or something. This looks like possibly a solder-free kit. But I think we are going to go ahead now and just play some fast-forward stuff while I sand this beautiful guitar. Almost seems like a crime. It sure is purty. But we're going to make it way cool, because this is the Shred Paul, not the... I got nothing. Alright, we have got 400 grit here, self-adhesive sandpaper. I am going to stick it to my shirt several times, because I'm going to stick it on this sponge pad, and they tend to like rip rubber off with them when you peel it off. So I'm just trying to kill this adhesive. Hopefully the micro lint from my shirt doesn't come through in the paint job. I'm sure it will not, because I do stupid stuff like that all the time. Alright, we got it wrapped around. Make sure there's no crazy ridges there on the sides. Then basically, this is a really nice finish, so there's not going to be a whole lot to it. It's going to sand easy. As you sand it, you might see some shiny spots. That would be due to orange peel. Seeing some tape residue where I was working on the electronics before and had some masking tape on there. But you basically want to sand this until there's no gloss left whatsoever. So I'm going to shut up for real this time and just go at it. Have fun. One cool thing about refinishing a guitar like this is I don't know how well it shows up on camera. Probably not nearly as much now that I wiped all the dust off. But you can see some shiny spots. Just where, you know, the two pieces of wood, or however this works, I'm not sure. Something just didn't jive quite right when they were gluing this all up, and, you know, they ended up clamping it. There's a little divot there, but the cool thing about refinishing a guitar is there's enough thickness in this finish that you can sand out these imperfections, and that'll just make your new paint job that much better. One other thing, try your best not to sand through this finish. And what I mean by that is do not sand until you see wood. If you see bare wood, you've got a nightmare, because you have to, that bare wood is going to soak up whatever finish you put on here. And it may look good today, but tomorrow you'll come back and the wood will have soaked all of that finish up, and it'll look bad. So do your best not to penetrate this surface. Another tip here, as long as your dust is white, you are still in your clear coat. Once this dust turns green, you have hit your color, and you don't have far to go before you're at the wood. So you need to stop as soon as you see green, but not necessarily. I don't think I'm going to try and get through this whole thing without ever sanding through the clear coat even. You have to watch on the edges. You want to take it real easy on those edges, because those are going to be the spots where you go through. So it appears that there's a real gnarly gash right here that I never noticed before because it was shiny. May be able to sand it out in the finish. May have to fill it. What I'm going to do here is pay close attention to when the sanding dust turns from white to green. When it turns to green, I have to stop immediately and put some Bondo on this if necessary. If this goes away and we're still seeing white sanding dust, then we're sitting pretty. But we'll see what happens here. Alright guys, the dreaded no warning sand through. On top of that, we still got our imperfection there. It's almost out, but we sanded through there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go get some glazing putty. Not glazing putty, polyester putty. I'm going to mix up a little bit. I'm going to fill that, and I'm just going to put a thin little coat over that. That way, we'll seal that wood up there, and hopefully it won't be thirsty for all of my paint. Okay guys, so you just saw me hand sand the back, neck, and headstock with 400 grit paper. So using this foam sanding block, I got this at like the automotive paint supply store in town. Very good for flat surfaces. You can bend it a little bit, but it's not super flexible, so sometimes you got to get in there with your fingers. And when you do get in there with your fingers, you always want to be conscious of how much weight you're putting on the sandpaper. For instance, if I have this sandpaper on my hand, it's like a sanding block with 4 neat ridges built into it. So you're theoretically going to sand 4 ridges into whatever you're doing. So keeping that in mind, you want to just use less pressure than you would think and keep your fingers together. You spread them out, they get worse. But just a light touch for these hard to get to places. Like I said, being very careful on the edges because that's where you're going to sand through. Another place you really want to avoid is I said before, the front side of the fretboard here. You don't want to mess that up. So we are going to paint this thing, obviously. It was very nice of them that their inlays on the headstock, I'm not sure exactly how they do these, but they are absolutely non-detectable once you sand them. You cannot feel them at all. That's definitely a good thing for when it comes to refinishing. These guitars seem to have a really nice, durable finish on them. So I was thinking that it was some kind of epoxy, and it is most certainly along the lines of fiberglass resin. It has a very strong floral scent when you sand it, almost disgustingly floral. But I almost wonder if these finishes are poured on these guitars somehow, as thick as they are. Which is funny because a finish like that is obviously, well, not obviously, but it is much more durable than lacquer. Lacquer is the finish of choice on guitars for feel, and some crazy lunatics claim that they can even hear the difference in a lacquer finish and a urethane finish. I certainly believe that on an acoustic, but I don't think it matters a bit on an electric. But nonetheless, it is much easier to use lacquer. A lot of the guys you'll hear talk about guitar finishes, and oh, they're using this cheap urethane finishes on the foreign guitars. We got the good lacquer over here. Just to put this into perspective, lacquer used to be used on cars, and it can be made to look really shiny, but it has no UV protection in it whatsoever. So if anything that's painted with lacquer, including your guitar, is going to crack over time, the finish will shrink and it can't stretch, so it cracks. So when the finish cracks, it takes everything underneath it, because it's got a good hold on the finish, on the surface underneath it, and it will crack the primer or whatever else is below it. So yeah, lacquer is most certainly not as durable as far as UV, and I wouldn't think that it is as durable for ding resistance either. But yeah, this part is not really that difficult, and I'm sure you all have been wondering what we're going to do with the binding. And I can tell you that the color we are painting this guitar is about the color, the base color of this guitar is going to be about the same color as the binding. And don't get mad at me, I've done this a million times. We will be painting over the binding, and for all intents and purposes, this will be like a Les Paul Studio that has no binding. It'll look fine. You won't be able to tell there used to be binding on it. If you're doing this yourself, you can most certainly mask off the binding and paint around, you can mask it off with masking tape and spray your color on and then unmask it, but you would want to clear coat over that as well. The clear coat will allow you, if you put a heavy enough clear coat on, you can then sand it out to the point that you won't even be able to feel that tape line from where you taped off the binding. Actually, that's kind of how this guitar was now. I'm sure this binding is well buried in clear coat. So we are painting over it. If you got a problem with that, I apologize, but I've done this a million times, and I promise it'll be just fine. Pretty much all we have left to do now is sand the top down, and it's really pretty, so this is going to hurt, but oh well. It's going to be much cooler when we finish it. And then I've got a few products here. This is IYV Paul Fantastic Glaze. Get this from the auto parts store. It's like Bondo, but in a smaller package, so they can charge you a lot more money for it. But it probably sands a bit easier than regular Bondo or plastic filler. And this is, I believe they call it a polyurethane glaze. This is just for filling small surface imperfections like scratches. In this case, flip this around here, we are actually going to go ahead and fill this hole here where the pick guard used to mount. This hole here, because we're not going to reuse the pick guard, so I don't see any point in leaving the holes there. And also, we've got our odd dent here in the side that we are going to fill as well with a little bit of the glazing putty. And yep, so now I'm going to go ahead and sand the top, this beautiful flamed maple top. Going to sand that down, make it nice and smooth. What is all over there? And then I'm going to go back and hit all of the corners by hand without a sanding block, and then we're ready to shoot some color on this thing. Stay tuned. find this kind of interesting. I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on screen or not. But almost all guitars, when you're sanding the finish down, you almost always run into at least one run on it. And it's funny that this one just happens to be maybe not completely under, but definitely your attention's drawn away from it for the pickguard, is where this sort of monkey business would never happen. We have got 3 little spots here that I want to just hit with a little bit of mud. I'm going to do a little bit in this area. As you can see, the shiny spot, that is a low spot. So that means essentially that there was a dent here or a pretty serious imperfection in the paint, but I would say that's a dent in the wood. So we're going to fill that with a little bit of plastic filler, or polyester filler, I believe it is. We have also got one hole here from the pickguard. Put a little bit of masking tape on the fretboard here, just to make sure we didn't get any gunk sticking to the fretboard. And then we've got the other pickguard hole here. Clean the dust out of them. And as you can see, probably, I hope you can see that, there's a little bit of damage from the arm that holds the pickguard that goes there. So yeah, we'll take care of that with some mud also. All right, I'm going to shut up here and put it on fast forward while I do this stuff. See you soon. So we are going to mix up some of our glaze here. It is not going to take very much at all. This is probably entirely too much right here. About the size of a quarter. And then you got your hardener that comes with your filler. You always want to make sure that the hardener is good and kneaded. So it's whatever the benzoyl peroxide is the active ingredient in hardener, the same stuff that's in acne medication. But it's way strong, so don't ever use it on your face or it'll peel your skin. But the hardener tends to separate something in there. So you need it, get it together. This can come in different colors, and if you've got some left over from some other Bondo, do not fear. If it is the cream hardener, it's all the same. Doesn't matter the color. A lot of body shops will use a particular color of hardener. So if they have to fix body work, they will know if it was them that did the body work or somebody else. So everybody will use a certain color. But what you want to do, about a quarter size little puddle, and then usually what I like to do, of course it didn't come out in a line there, I usually like to make a line. Well, maybe I'm out of hardener. I usually like to make a line halfway across my puddle, if it's just a shallow puddle like that. And then you are going to want to mix that with something. Sure would have been nice if I would have gotten something to do so before I started filming here. I'm just going to use a piece of cardboard to mix this up. You'll see that it becomes all one color when it's fully mixed. And if it's not fully mixed, it will not fully harden, and you'll be left with a mess. So make sure that you mix it thoroughly, and you got to be quick, because you only got to, especially depending on your temperature, if it's, you know, in the 50s out, you can probably get away with about 10 minutes before it hardens, but you know, 70 or above, and you are looking at maybe 5 minutes tops. So I've got a razor blade here, which I am going to use to apply this. It's not the best way. Probably a plastic one is best, but I don't have one here, so I'm just going to use a razor blade. Okay, we'll do this one first. And about half of the razor blade covered with it. That way you ain't got to put on a lot more than you need. Kind of put a little downward pressure on it so you can push it into the hole. Pull it down as smooth as you can. And we should be good to go with that. Over here, our low spot. Get it on as smooth as you can. The smoother you apply it, the easier it is to sand. And just the better luck you'll have with it. We got our little and our Bondo has set up on us, so we're going to have to mix up a little bit more for that. It's quite a pain. I guess I used a little too much hardener. You can, depending on the amount of hardener you add, that also affects your dry time, but if you go too much hardener, you'll end up with a really rubbery product instead of a good, hard, plasticky product that you're looking for. And of course, the rubbery stuff will not sand very well. It'll likely just clog your sandpaper when you try. So, let me get a little more mixed up here. Cardboard is the best thing you can possibly mix this stuff on. Just throw it away when you're done. But this stuff tends to get very warm as it cures. And I believe the technical term is set. This stuff sets. It doesn't dry. It kind of sets or maybe cures. I don't know. But I'm not worried about getting it on the binding because, as I already mentioned, we're painting over the binding. Alright, and that's that. This stuff is sandable within pretty much as soon as it sets. You can start sanding on it. This stuff does have like a waxy surface on it as soon as it cures, but that sands right off and it becomes dull and very smooth. Alright guys, the Bondo has set now for us. I have got 180 grit sandpaper here, and I'm going to hit it with this just enough to knock that waxy coating off that I was talking about earlier. Shouldn't take too long. You'll notice the filler kind of takes on a more dull appearance once it sets up. I got some in here on the corner, which is kind of a pain in the butt. But no matter, it'll be fine. This particular filler, which I don't know if I mentioned, comes from O'Reilly Auto Parts, sands really easily. So I got that one. I'll hit this guy over here. And you do want to use your sanding block once you get the initial wax off. And I mean, you can knock the wax off with a sanding block also, but a heavier grit's always better for that. If I'm doing a large area in Bondo, I will, right before it fully cures, when it's still a little bit soft, I will use a really heavy grit, like 40 grit, and shape it with that while it's still kind of soft. And then once it hardens, you know, move up through the grits and make it smooth. Got her all decked out and ready to take to the paint shop. Unfortunately, I'm in the process of finding a good place to do the paint work where I can film as well. Unfortunately, I can't film at my current location. So we're going to be, first of all, laying down a sealer on this, like a gray sealer first of all. And then we're going to be applying our off-white, which is a base coat. Base coat is just color. It has no gloss to it on its own, so next time you guys see this, it will be all in off-white but flat. Then we will add our secondary color, and then we will clear coat the whole thing. As far as what we're painting and what we're not painting, we're painting all of the binding on the body. However, on the neck, the binding and the fretboard is getting is going to get masked off. And then when we apply the clear coat, we're only going to mask off the fretboard itself, and we will clear coat over the binding here when we do that. The headstock will get color as well, of course. And also these inserts here, I didn't really show any of sanding those, but you know, you just put your finger in there, you can put as much pressure as you want on these. With the 400 grit should be sufficient. To sand the paint, you gotta really get in all the crevices here as good as you can around this. If you have shiny spots, chances are there's going to be an issue with the paint sticking in that spot, so you really want to do this until you've got no more gloss left in your paint at all. All right, well, I think that's about it. I will mask off this fretboard real quick, and then I'm off to the paint shop. We're going to mask off the fretboard and neck binding here. This is not regular masking tape. This is called fine line tape. And I'm going to use it. I think it leaves a better edge than any of the expensive painter's tape. And you get a set of this. You get like several different thicknesses of this all in one package off of Amazon for fairly cheap. Like I said, I think it's a much better way to go. I don't know if you can see this, but when IYV painted this thing, they got a little bit of green up onto the fretboard. We are going with white, so if I mask off this perfectly, we're going to have a really ugly green spot on our binding there. So when you're doing a repaint like this, I learned this when I used to paint cars at Earl Scheib, if the last guy screwed up, you got to follow in his footsteps, unfortunately. So you want to just make sure that where they screwed up masking, you got to do the same. In a perfect world, when we had all the time in the world, that would be fine. But you don't... What I like to do, you probably can't see it very well, but what I like to do when I mask these fretboards off, I like to leave just a tiny bit of the fretboard showing right along the edge. I don't know if you guys can see it here, but there's a little tiny white edge. I like to leave that and just paint over it, just to err on the safe side, to make sure we don't end up with any green spots along the neck, since we're going such a drastically different color. So all that is going to do is make our binding look just ever so slightly smaller. Mainly the only reason that I'm masking this binding off is to maintain my fret markers on the side here. I could have added new ones of some sort, but unnecessary for this level of build that we're doing. All right, got that side done. Let's move on to this side. Also, try your best not to lay your tape down on surfaces. The edges are sticky, so it picks up that stuff when you do. I know it happens, but in a perfect world it wouldn't. Again, we've got a similar issue going on over here where they under-masked before. So we're going to follow in their footsteps again just to make sure we don't got none of that green on there. And let's see, I'm not sure if this is... I've heard that Epiphone paints their binding on rather than real binding. And I mean, I totally believe that that's true. However, the neck of this guitar definitely has binding, because I can see down at the end by where the nut goes. I don't like that piece. I'm going to tear that off. Start over again. I don't like any of that. You want to try, or at least I want to try, and make sure that I leave just under mask, just like the last guy did. All the way, just to ensure that we don't have any green boo-boos. I'm pretty satisfied with that there. I think we got a little bit of the binding that we're going to cover the entire way. Again, make sure also that you tape off this part of the nut. You don't want to get any paint in there at all. So we will go ahead and do that. All right. And we're going to get some wider tape to fill in the rest of this gap here. And then we should be ready to spray. I will see you guys shortly.